So, I've looked into Peter Griffin's family tree,
That's right. We trace our early family roots to Asia.
Quagmire's family tree,
Oh, I say that.
but now I want to move over into another Seth MacFarlane show, American Dad, to look at and explain the family history of Stan Smith. And to do this, I bring together every little tidbit or clue we get given over its many seasons. So, let's begin. So right at the very top, we have Stan's great-great-grandpa, who was a talented kickball player, so much so that he won a sizable tract of land in a game. This land would be passed down to his great-grandson, who then left it to Stan and his half-brother Rusty,
So, you two decide who gets what.
which then ultimately caused a big family feud, but more on that a little bit later. Therefore, moving on down, we come to Jack Smith. If you've ever wondered why Stan is the way he is, look no further than One-Eyed Jack.
Stan, who is this?
Just the most awesome super spy that ever lived.
You see, Stan believed his father was some kind of secret agent who was away for long periods to go on missions. Therefore, he looked up to his dad for doing this, making it a big reason why Stan went into the CIA in the first place. In reality, however, Jack Smith was a renowned thief who abandoned Stan regularly as a child. And still not knowing this, Stan was thrilled when he got asked to join his old man on a secret mission. But it turned out to be nothing but a jewel heist, and Stan learned the cold hard truth.
I can't believe it. I modeled my whole life after you.
But despite finding out that his daddy was a no-good rotten con man, Stan let him go free.
I swear on my grandchildren, this car is the last thing I ever steal.
And they would eventually reconcile, but Stan would always remain more than willing to forgive his deadbeat dad.
I love you, Dad.
He's got some daddy issues. Jack Smith would never really reform his criminal ways, which came to bite him in the butt when he was eventually gunned down during a police chase. And poor Stan was devastated, so he formed a teen band, performed a seance, and allowed Jack's spirit to possess Steve's body. You know, normal grieving process feelings and stuff.
Oh, you've been crying, Shirley Temple. Your makeup's running.
Now, I want to quickly mention Grandpa Smith, aka Stan's fake dad. For decades, Stan kept his father's secret agent life under wraps, but when he got married to Francine, his dad obviously needed to be there, so Stan swung by Home Depot 3 hours before his wedding, grabbed the first senile old man he saw, and then spent the next couple of decades pretending he was his real dad. And it wasn't until the death of Grandpa Smith that Jack returned and the truth was finally revealed.
Meet Jack Smith, my real dad.
So what?
Fake Grandpa's passing was particularly hard for Steve, as they were very, very close, but well, we will start to learn as we go through this family tree that it is very complicated and not really all that wholesome at all. So therefore, this brings me on to Stan's relationship with his mum, which is, well, as complicated and as unwholesome as things come.
Scrub your VJ. Rinse your VJ. Next we'll do your tushy.
Stan has mummy issues. Much to Francine's chagrin, Stan and Betty are incredibly close. Some may say a little too close. To put it mildly, Stan was a bit obsessed with his mum, having kidnapped and marooned many of her potential suitors on an island for decades on end. And after the death of her next husband Hercules, Betty actually moved into the Smiths. Again, this didn't go too well, leading on to her having a relationship with Roger the Alien, who was disguised as Tom Yabo.
That's right, Stan. I'm your new stepdad.
What was actually surprising though was how good of a stepdad Tom actually was to Stan, becoming the father figure that he always craved.
It's okay, Dad.
But then Betty tried to kill Tom for insurance money at Niagara Falls, and Tom let her succeed, therefore ending this Tom persona and allowing Betty to fulfill her dream of living in France.
I can't believe he's gone. He was the best father I ever had.
So moving over to Jack's line, let's now talk about Rusty Smith, Stan's half-brother. A staple of all sitcoms is the sudden appearance of a totally unknown and undiscussed sibling, and American Dad didn't disappoint when we abruptly met Stan's half-brother, Rusty Smith. At a young age, their grandfather offered them a choice, either $20,000 in cash or a tract of land owned by his own grandfather. You know, that kickball player we mentioned earlier. Anyway, Stan thought he was screwing Rusty over by giving him the supposedly worthless land. Little did he know though that the land had vast copper deposits and Rusty would become absurdly wealthy.
So, we're the poor family.
This then led to Stan trying to take everything for himself by knocking out Rusty's family out and then attempting to swap lives with them.
That son of a bitch, trying to pull the old house switcheroony on us.
This, of course, didn't work out and the Smiths were eventually kicked out.
No, you don't understand. It should all be mine. The floor is heated. Oh, come on.
So it seems that Stan has a whole side of his family out there that he successfully alienated with his jealousy, and they haven't really seen each other since. In fact, subsequent episodes have poked fun at Rusty's flimsy canon status.
And you have a brother too, right?
When it's convenient, yes.
Even in the very most recent season.
Stan's brother is barely even canon.
But Rusty isn't his only half-brother. There's also a guy called Nicholas, but he's only really briefly been mentioned.
Well then, maybe we should just stay estranged until you can find a dramatic enough reason to show up on my doorstep unannounced.
Next we come to Stan's wife, Francine Smith. The real driving force of American Dad is Stan and Francine's marriage. She's both shown to be supportive of her husband while reining back some of his crazy. They got together in the 80s after Stan showed compassion by putting an injured raccoon out of its misery.
She said it was the most compassionate act she'd ever witnessed. And I got to kill something.
Oh, how romantic. Anyway, they got married and started a family, but that's not to say that everything's been smooth sailing. Like there was that time where Stan found out that Francine had a high body count after seeing her many rose bushes. And in case you didn't remember, they each represented a different one of her lovers.
This is the largest sex garden in North America.
And seeing as Stan has only slept with one woman, he feels left out, so Francine gives him a free pass to bang anyone he chooses. She even divorces him so he can sleep around guilt-free.
He couldn't perform in bed.
Ha! Couldn't rise to the occasion, not even a little.
But of course, she soon regrets it and runs to stop the act, and you would have thought that Stan would also have a change of heart and not go through with it, but instead, he makes love to the woman.
Had sex with her?
5 times! I wanted to make sure it was consistently meaningless. And it was!
I mean, this is a Macfarlane show. These characters are bound to be a bit, unhinged. And then there was that time where Stan flat out admitted that he only got married to Francine because she's hot.
She is just beautiful.
That's the reason I married her.
Well, that's not the only reason.
Yes, it is.
But it turns out that they are as bad as each other, as she too admitted that she stayed with him for superficial reasons.
I promise to be with you only if you make money and stay healthy.
It's not exactly a fairy tale relationship, but I guess if it works for them, then who are we to judge? Anyway, let's now talk about Thundercat Smith, Stan's other wife.
Her name's impossible to pronounce, so I just call her Thundercat.
In season 1, Stan of Arabia, he manages to royally piss off his boss and therefore get transferred to Saudi Arabia. At first he hated it, but eventually he grew to love life in the Middle East. And one of the reasons why was his second wife, who he named Thundercat.
Look, Francine, it's just the way things are done here.
And even though it's legal to have multiple wives in Saudi Arabia, it didn't make Francine feel any better about it. In fact, they fought like Thundercats and Thunderdogs. And even though she scored higher than Francine, Thundercat was never seen again after the Smiths returned to America. Now, let's take a look at Stan and Francine's children. Francine gave birth to twins, Hayley and Bailey, but the latter of whom only appeared in a flashback, where it was implied that he died because Stan wouldn't get him vaccinated. Then there's Hayley Dream Smasher Smith, an ultra-liberal hippie who is a constant source of disappointment to her father Stan.
Now, honey, I love you both, but Steve is not a left-wing liberal who I tried to raise properly, but somehow, what's this?
And fun fact, she was born in Africa while Francine and Stan were on their honeymoon, and was even delivered by a baboon.
Francine, you make coffee?
But saying this, she might not actually even be Stan's biological daughter, because it was revealed that the night before their wedding, Francine slept with a guy called Joel Larson. And when Stan found out, he ultimately chose not to find out the truth of Hayley's true parentage, because in his eyes, it didn't matter. Hayley was his daughter no matter what.
She's my daughter no matter what.
But what do you guys think? Could she be Stan's biological daughter, or do you think she's Joel's? Hayley's long-term boyfriend, Jeff Fisher, eventually gets married to her, making Jeff officially part of Stan's clan. This is a clan that only would get bigger, especially when the pair adopted Nemo in the episode Season's Beatings. But instead of being a proud grandpa, Stan tried to kill the kid when he found out that Nemo was the Antichrist.
Nemo's the son of Satan! We have to destroy him!
No! He is my child!
But Hayley didn't care that her baby was devil spawn, so she simply sent him away to live with Sarah Palin in safety. And even though you'd think that having a devil's baby would deter them from having more children, you'd be wrong, as Hayley and Jeff would go on to having 6 more kids, as seen in the flash forward episode No Weddings and a Funeral. And I have to say that one of the kids, Noah, is the spitting image of Joel Larson, so maybe Hayley isn't actually Stan's biological daughter after all. But before any of these human babies, Hayley would actually have fishy babies with Klaus. In the episode One Fish, Two Fish, Hayley marries Klaus and turns herself into a fish so he won't be deported back to Germany. But while sharing a fishbowl, Hayley accidentally gets pregnant and hatched a bunch full of little guppies.
Why didn't you tell me, you jerk it in the treasure chest?
But they never really show us what happened to these babies. Maybe they've all been spawned into hundreds of offspring, or maybe Stan simply flushed them down the toilet. Who knows? So that's Hayley covered. Now let's move on to her little brother, Steve Smith. Stan always wanted a son. He wanted a strapping young lad who was good at sports and follow in his footsteps. Instead, he got Steve, a skinny little geek who loves Star Trek and D&D.
It's my Dungeons and Dragons masterpiece.
Steve, why do you make it so hard to love you?
Now, I love Star Trek, so I don't really see the big deal here, but it does seem that Stan thinks that Steve could really have done with some of his help in life. I mean, he literally became his bully just to toughen him up.
And you need a bully to toughen you up. Well, now you got one.
And then there was that time where he controlled a robot girl to date Steve.
My son wants nothing to do with me, and the only way to get close to him is to be an incredibly stacked teenage girl.
Honestly, it's an incredibly disturbing relationship, but whatever you think about his questionable parenting techniques, at least you can say that Stan has always stuck by his family, unlike his own dad, who completely abandoned him. So, that's Hayley, Bailey and Steve covered, but what about Tunji? Tunji was Stan and Francine's adopted kid through an international charity. He arrived from Africa and instantly became the apple of their eyes, but then they got tired of him and ditched him. And when they started missing him, they retrieved him yet again, only to abandon him at the back of a moving car.
I miss him.
Me too.
So yeah, Stan and Francine are definitely not the best parents to say the least. But again, somehow still better than Peter and Lois. Next we have Roger Smith. Although Roger is obviously not biologically related to Stan by any means, he did adopt the family name, therefore it's only fair that he's included in this family tree too. But with all that in mind, Roger isn't really a branch on Stan's family tree. He's more like a root, or, you know, a little rock just to the side somewhere hanging out. And if we're counting Roger as a Smith, then I suppose we should include his son Rogu. Well, less of a son, and more like a talking tumour.
His name's Rogu.
Rogu sees himself as Roger's son, and he's a real chip of the old block, sharing Roger's love for dressing up.
Rogu, did you make that little Ricky Spanish outfit all by yourself?
And also like Roger, Rogu is a kind of weird, murderous little psycho.
That's Rogu. He loves shooting people in the nuts. He's not wrong, it's funny.
And so we've come to the end of the video. Let me know what family tree you'd like to see next. It can literally be from any show or any character. So write it down in the comments and I'll sure to get round to it.